Hello, everyone, and welcome to EduMatch. So thank you so much for joining us. So this week, we have a very, very special topic from a very, very special moderator and some very, very special panelists. So we're going to have everyone introduce themselves. So we're going to start from my right to left. We're going to skip over our moderator in the middle, Mandy, and we'll bring it back to her at the end. So if we could kick things off with intros, beginning with Rodney.
Good afternoon, evening, or whenever you watch this. I'm Rodney Turner. We didn't talk about how we're going to introduce yourself, but I'm also known as Techie Turner. I live here in New Jersey, brave in the cold.
Woo woo! Well, it's great to have you here on the East Coast. So welcome, welcome, and great to have you here on EduMatch. Great. Next up, we have Rochelle.
All right, I'm Rochelle Dene Post. I teach Spanish and STEAM in Pittsburgh, also on the East Coast, not quite as cold. Very excited to have Rodney on the East Coast with me. And part of this panel tonight is going to be awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Glad to have you here, Rochelle. All right, so we're going to skip over our moderator, Mandy, and we will go next to Jen.
Hi, everyone. I am Jennifer Cassett-Todd. I am a teacher, librarian, and author of Social Media, and I am East, but I am in Canada. So I know you've all been enjoying a beautiful Thanksgiving. I hope you had a great one, and I'm just excited to be here on panel with these special moderators, or these special guests, and Mandy, super moderator.
Awesome. Great to have you here on Sweet and Talk. So welcome back, Jen. And next up, we have Evan.
Good afternoon, everybody, or evening at this point. My name is Evan Abramson. I'm the Director of Technology in the Millburn Township Public Schools in New Jersey as well. So I'm glad to be on the East Coast with Rodney, Rochelle, and Jen. So I'm super excited to be here and be involved in the chat tonight. So thank you guys for having me as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to EduMatch, Evan. All right. And last and certainly not least, we have our phenomenal moderator. You all know her. You all love her, Mandy Froehlich. So Mandy, if you could please introduce yourself and then take it away.
Sure. So my name is Mandy Froehlich, and I am a Director of Innovation and Technology for my day job. And I am also the author of The Fire Within and Divergent EDU. So I'm excited to be moderating here tonight. I am from Wisconsin, where it's currently like a balmy 25 degrees. And so I feel like Jen is the only one who can actually like feel me on this one, because all the rest of you guys in Jersey, you think it's cold when it's like 60. So, so anyway, I'm going to get on to the questions about Divergent EDU and Divergent teaching. So the first one for you guys is, I developed the definition of a divergent teacher using the psychological definition of divergence. And this is how I define a divergent teacher. And I'm going to put this on my screen very quickly so you can read this as soon as the old Hangouts is working. Okay. So divergent teaching is the ability to recognize our own assumptions, look for limitations, and challenge our own thinking in regards to teaching and learning. It's taking an idea and creating new thinking that will facilitate student learning in new innovative directions for deeper understanding. It is diverging from the norm, challenging current ideas, looking for a variety of solutions, and a willingness to learn from failure and grow. And so my question for you is, what part of the definition speaks to you the most?
I can start. So one of the things that I really, really love about that definition is the notion of identifying our own assumptions and recognizing where our limitations are. Because ultimately, we, at the front of the room or in the middle of the room, wherever it is that we're facilitating learning for kids and for each other, if we don't recognize our own assumptions and really look at the way in which we're impacting learning, or how learning is impacted by what we know or think we know, then we're not really going to be of service to our students, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
The part that speaks to me is when we're talking about diverging from the norm and challenging current ideas, because I think that education has fallen into a pattern or a lot of just key words that people will just focus on, the words, as opposed to necessarily the individual child. And I think teaching is either back in the 90s, it's been the same, or it's been so far out there and somewhere else that I feel like we have a group of teachers, a group of educators that have the ability to, with so many tools available to them now, to just go so far off the beaten path and try something different that could really have a better impact on student learning than really what we've done in the past. So for me, that's really what resonates with me the best.
So
Thank you.
I'll go next. The part that resonates with me the most is the fact that looking for limitations and challenging our own thinking regarding teaching and learning. One of the things that I feel I've gotten stuck in the fact is that there's a box. We've heard this before. There's a box and we get stuck inside that box. But that box is only what we have inside of ourselves, our own limitations, our own filters, our own lenses that we see things through. If we take those lenses off, we are going to be able to see things differently. We're going to be able to see them through other people's eyes, because we're going to take the time to take it off and then put on other lenses that other people are seeing, especially our students. I think that is the filter and the lens that we have to see things through.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is the part, my favorite part of the divergent teaching definition is the challenging our own assumptions and limitations, because I think sometimes we see limitations, but are they really limitations, or are we just seeing them that way? Are we just perceiving them that way? So I think it's really important, that we check those at the door, especially like Jen said, when it's affecting student learning. We really need to figure out, is it just an assumption that we're making? Is it an assumption that students can't do something? I hear that a lot from both teachers and administrators. Well, we don't do X because students can't do it. Are we sure about that? So I think that is a really important part. Okay, so the next question, going back up to my questions here. So using the same definition, what things would you imagine a divergent teacher doing in the classroom, and how would their thinking differ from somebody who's still working on their own divergence?
Did I buzz in fast enough?
Oh, hey.
I did. Yeah. Like silence. Am I the only one here on panel that's actually in the classroom teaching right now?
No. Jen
Jen
teaches.
Yeah. Right, that's right. So for that one, like for me, for years, I was just like teaching the way I was taught. I thought I had to stand in the front of the classroom. I had to give homework. I had to use the book. I had to cover the whole book. You name it. I just thought that that's what I had to do. And then about a year and a half ago, I remember reaching out to probably all of you, and then some, like, these students are not engaged and they're bored, and just like, it just didn't feel right. And so then last year, I got rid of the rows and I stopped giving the homework, and I tried doing things so differently that it was really uncomfortable for me. But I found when I broke away from like feeling like I had to, that there was some rule written somewhere or unwritten rule, and I could just be kind of like myself and, do things just because I thought that they were the best for the students, not because I needed to cover them because they were in the curriculum. And I finally started to see, like, I wasn't teaching the class, I was teaching the students, and every single student needed me to move around and be with them. And while it's completely exhausting on most days, it's absolutely fantastic. And, I've even had students come into my room and say, you know what, I love being in here. It's so different this year. And I didn't ask them for feedback. They just came and just talked about like what was different about it. And of course, then I engaged them and said, well, what do you like? And they said, well, you don't do this like every other class. You don't do this like every other teacher, or something like that. So I thought that was kind of like, it gave me the inspiration and motivation to kind of keep moving in that direction, even though it's still sometimes uncomfortable. But diverging doesn't necessarily mean bad. I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, you're breaking away from what's the norm. And I mean, yeah, that can be bad, but in some cases it's not. It's necessary to do that. So I've seen such great success with a lot of struggle, of course, because nothing ever comes easy. Or it shouldn't, because we're learning. But I think that it's really beneficial when you do break from that mold or how you think you have to do things. Okay, I'm done.
So Rochelle, I have a follow-up question. Would you say that being a Divergent teacher has made you more engaged as well?
Yes, because, and as I've been writing, like in all of these different formats, trying to think where I wrote something down, it pushes you to think a lot. And I got away from being myself, and I've always been different. And I've heard teachers say, well, I don't think I can do this job. I'm too different. I'm like, you say that like it's a bad thing. Well, I'm not following procedures. So I do feel like there was a period of time where like I wasn't in love with the job of teaching, but I was looking at it as a job and not like, just like it's fun. Like I like to be there. I like to be with the students. And so I definitely feel like I go to bed at night, I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to go to school tomorrow. I mean, when I get up, it's a different story for a little bit, but yeah, it really has. So I was kind of disengaged for a while, and it took just throwing caution to the wind and like hoping for the best and saying to the kids sometimes, you know what, that didn't really go that well. And oh, well, try again. But yeah, absolutely.
And just to jump up on that, I love what you were saying about how you tried something different, Rochelle, and then you see it working and that invigorates you. But I think part of, for me, reaching out to PLN, I mean, so many people on this panel are people that I use as a soundboard, or if I say I'm thinking about this, what do you think? Being able to recognize that sometimes not everything you need is within the building, right? If you do feel very strange or a bit like an outlier, you can that can really bring you down. Particularly if there's an administrator where you don't, you're not feeling supported, to be able to seek support in other ways, because ultimately how important it is to bring in those experiences to your kids, right? And so for me, that's been a huge thing as well. Not just recognizing I need to do something differently here because this is not working, but also having a support group, a PLN, with which I could sort of say, be reflective and think about, this worked, what could I do differently? Because when you get there, you realize when you talk to other people, you realize I'm struggling but they are too. And then they found success doing this, and maybe that will work for me. And then, right. And then when it does, to be able to reflect on that and celebrate with others is really cool too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I always say I would never be, I'm only as strong as the people I surround myself with. And I mean, virtually as well. And, I've been in schools where the climate hasn't been the greatest and the culture's been very weak, and people are okay with mediocrity. Mediocrity? Can I say that word? They're okay with that, and those weren't always necessarily the people I wanted to surround myself with, And so yeah, I totally and completely agree. The entire basis for everything I do is my PLN, because it's those relationships, but not only the deep relationships, but the kind of relationships that when you need people at a certain time in a day, unbeknownst to them, and you say, can you guys jump on for me? Everyone's like, yeah, I can jump on for you, and I will talk to you, and we'll get through this together. So it's those kinds of things that I need those people for. Some comments that some YouTube Live participants have made are, Valerie said, a Divergent teacher is truly meeting the needs of students. Differentiation is happening. Quality strategies, feedback, assessments, and choice in how they demonstrate mastery would be visible. Also, Laura said a Divergent teacher definitely breaks away from it's always been done this way and moves towards a what if mode of thinking. So pushing boundaries of what we can do. So that's awesome. Thank you guys for participating. I definitely agree with that. Does anybody else have anything for question 2?
I have one more thing to add. Imagine that, right? No,
that's great.
No, just because I dropped a link about this chat and Laura was one that I sent it to, but shout outs to like PLN, like you said, you can count on people and reach out to them. I think that, and Jen, I think it was you that said about like sharing the story and the struggles. one of the powerful things about doing things like this, or having Voxer or Twitter or whatever, and having that PLN, is that like you can share your stories, because I think a lot of the time teachers might be afraid to try something different because they think they're the only one doing it and that it might be wrong. Or if they try it and it doesn't go well, they're like, okay, it didn't go well, and they don't branch out. So I had to give a shout out to Laura, because she has been like on there all the time in the last, especially the last week, as I've been running through things in my mind too, and all of you, of course. So that's all. I'm done.
All right. Anybody else?
Can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I definitely think about a divergent teacher in the classroom doing things is looking at things and doing them differently, just as Rochelle and Jennifer said. And that, I think it was Rochelle said, no, anyway, it doesn't matter. One of them said, meeting things at the door. And that was one of the things that I did specifically. I heard about this crazy thing about greeting your kids at the door and not letting them come in until they say hi or hello. And just starting off of, hey, what do they look like? And how are they going to be? I couldn't tell you how many times I had a student stop and say, Mr. Turner, I want to talk to you before we get started. It's like, okay, no problem. Let me get these kids in and going, and we'll be good. So they would stand outside the door and they would talk. They would talk to me and say, hey, I really had a bad night, or something happened. It's like, okay, let's work through this. And then I would take that information and pass it on to the rest of their teachers to let them know what was going on. And so many times their kids were like so much better throughout the day. And to me, that was a divergence because it was completely different, but yet it started off in such a way that it was innocuous. It was an idea I had received, and it started spreading. The next year, the principal's like, everyone's going to greet every kid at the door. And I'm like, why are you forcing it? It should be genuine. But you know what? Just going to let that be. And just as that year went on, there was much more conversations with kids. There wasn't as many suspensions. There weren't as many of issues and things like that. So I really did appreciate that I'd gotten these ideas specifically from a PLN, and I went ahead and used it in my classroom. And I think that was a huge turning point. So to answer the second question, how would the thinking be different? I think it's different because they are not working through the mechanics of teaching or the mechanics of trying to figure out something different. They've got that down. They're now working on making themselves better to be able to bring in additional ideas and to find out where their flow is, so that way their kids will be able to be successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think too, a really important point of what you said, and kind of what we've all said, is that, divergence, like innovation, has nothing to do with technology. A lot of times people say, well, we're super innovative because we have all these devices. Nope, that really has nothing to do with it. It's the way that you're using them. And even divergence really has nothing to do with technology. You can be very divergent in your thinking without picking up a computer. So Jessica on Twitter just said, what sticks out to me is that we recognize our own assumptions as teachers. I feel many people claim they do not make assumptions. However, in my opinion, everyone needs to realize that everyone makes assumptions, and we must recognize these to become more understanding. And absolutely, because we all have assumptions and biases. You can't make those go away. Our own stories, we've grown up, has, any experiences we've had that have nothing to do with teaching have created assumptions and biases. And there's nothing we can do about that except recognize them and make sure that we're not allowing them to change the way that we teach or we think or we act. So I think that is a really important point. Go ahead.
Two more things I wanted to say. One, one of my years, I had to teach a 5-6 combination, And then the latter half of the year, well, that entire year, the principal's like, you're going to get a smart board. You're going to get a smart board. Don't worry, you're going to get a smart board. So I've been teaching and formulating, trying to figure out how I'm going to do it. And she said, you know what, just teach those 5th graders as 6th graders. And I thought about it and I said, no, I can't do that. I said, because they can't miss out on their 5th grade foundational skills. They have to use them to be able to go on to 6th grade. So that's what I did. I had my 5th graders, and then I cycled my day to have my small groups, and then I had my 6th graders for their different subjects. So I did a lot of different things that year. But once we got the smart board, let me tell you, it was an additional tool that I had and that I used in the classroom. So at the end of the year, I'm gonna jump to the end of the year, the teacher's like, the principal's like, wow, your scores were like off the charts. It was really amazing. That smart board did a lot. And I went, no, that was me. That was me. And that was my students. It was the culture that we had created. It wasn't the smart board, it was the tools. It was great to have that tool, but I figured out how to do it without that tool. It just made it more convenient. So that way, if a student said, hey, I don't remember what was going on, it's like, look at the board, it's there. So it was really great. The second thing I wanted to go ahead and jump in on was the fact that we have, just the fact that nope, sorry, I already made my 2 points.
Thanks. Yes, that is so true, and that is a great point. Okay, anybody else?
So for me, just to add on top of what everybody else said real quickly, is the fact that I think divergent teaching doesn't necessarily have to mean you are the cool, super cool teacher that's their best friend, that's a student best friend. I think a lot of teachers that are from the old school view that as a separate way of teaching, as, oh, they're just trying to be friends with them. They're just trying to really associate them. You know, a new teacher, a veteran teacher can't really be that way. And I feel like some of my best teachers that I work with now, or the most divergent teachers, are my veteran teachers who have gone on and tried just something different because they know where they have to get to. They can just think about all the different ways that they really might be able to take time and really affect the student in a specific way. So I think that I just want to make that clarification, because a lot of times teachers say, well, I've been doing it so long this way and it works. Well, that's great. But do we really understand the feedback of those students a year, 2 years later to see if it really worked, or if it just worked because they were smart students that happened to score well or happened to just understand the lesson? So, for me, that was just the one little small piece. You don't have to be a new teacher to do it. You could be a veteran teacher who's really, really capable in the classroom, and just try something different and just try to think about how you can have a better effect on your individual students.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know relationships are key. So those have to happen. That's one thing that has to be happening in a divergent classroom. Okay, so there was a question. Stacy had a question. It was, does anybody know of self-assessments for divergent versus convergent thinking? And I don't. That is a really good question. I do have, there's a part in Divergent EDU that talks about some of the characteristics of a divergent teacher. And I think probably having some sort of self-assessment would be awesome. I could work on something like that, but does anybody else know of, and we're going to be talking about the characteristics in a minute, but does anybody else know of a self-assessment for something like that?
I think that's a great project for you, Mandy. Add it to your to-do list. I really think it would be worthwhile.
I'm on it.
Because of the power of self-assessment, right? I'm working with students on assessing their own skills. And I think there's something about that metacognition, right? The thinking about your learning and then assessing yourself, that is so very, very powerful. So I think it would be a great resource.
Yeah, absolutely. I will get working on that. Thanks, Stacy, for the question. Okay, so the next question we have is, Divergent EDU is written based on the hierarchy of needs for innovation and divergent thinking that I developed. It's an organizational structure for supporting teachers in being more divergent and innovative. Each level is a support for the others, much like the foundational levels of a house. Is there a foundational level that stands out to you? And again, I am going to just share my screen for 1 second here. Okay. So the hierarchy of needs, the bottom foundational level is climate and culture. And then again, these are foundational levels. So it's not a gamified type thing. You don't move up the hierarchy, but they're foundational structures. So climate and culture is on the bottom, then effective leadership, mindset, professional learning, and then innovation and divergent thinking. And then, of course, within each level, there's additional additional kind of the way that the supports are, some of the ways that the supports can be implemented, because goodness knows that if we tried to put everything on here, not everything would fit, but some of them in there. So is there one that speaks to you?
So I know we talked about this in a Twitter chat the other night, but for me, the climate and culture being the foundation is by far, to me, the most important aspect, because everything has to be nurtured. And I think nurturing that entire climate to where your teachers are comfortable taking risks. The administrators are actually comfortable watching teachers take risks and not throw it back in their face a little bit when they take it and it doesn't work. To me, it's the whole foundation of a school system, where creating that climate, creating that culture of personalization, or for the students, but really allowing our teachers to have a little free reign in trying new things. And I think when a teacher understands that they can take a risk or feel free, even during an observation, if they wanted to really just go out there and do something different, I think that just it allows the teachers to really come up with some great things. And then I think it then in turn allows our students to take risks because they see their teachers taking risks. And I know, we talk about administration. As an administrator, we want to develop that culture, but it all starts with I feel like the administrators too, because we need to take a deep breath too, and really appreciate what our teachers are doing in the classroom, and encouraging them to take those risks.
I would agree with Evan. But to me, I feel like there's an interconnectedness with the climate and culture and effective leadership, right? Because so much of the climate and culture can be impacted by a leader as well. So those two, to me, are just they're. I don't want to say they're one and of the same, because I do agree in the separation of them, but I do think that one. So much. I mean, if you've been in a school where there was a leader who didn't trust, like in your thing where you didn't trust the teachers, didn't smile, the teachers didn't feel supported as a result of that leadership, then the climate and culture suffered, obviously, in pretty heavy ways. And then that whole teacher disengagement piece is, I believe, connected to those two pieces as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the climate culture leadership is the number one change that people ask for in the hierarchy. And but the reason that climate and culture is the base, because I went back and forth with those two. Like, I thought they really could go either way. The reason climate and culture is the base is because if an effective leader goes into a building with a strong culture and a positive climate, they can work on supporting going up the hierarchy, supporting mindset, supporting PD. But if they go into a climate and culture that is negative and like a very weak culture, they're going to spend all their time supporting that. So yeah, I totally, because a leader can make or break the climate and culture in a building 100%. So it's more about, when you're looking at the hierarchy, like, what are they supporting on top of that? And for an effective leader to really do their job on mindset and professional development and divergent thinking, they have to have that strong climate and culture in there. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. I need to go reread that part in your book because it makes so much sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else? All right.
All right, I'll jump in.
All right.
I'll jump in.
Let's hear it.
I had the wonderful opportunity to be in two different situations. One was in, well, a couple were in Phoenix, and both of them were in Phoenix. But one of the things that I found as far as effective leadership and that principle that said, hey, we're going to get you a smart board, we're going to make sure that you have all the tools that you need necessary, a truly effective leader. She made sure that the climate and culture were there, and that this is how we're going to do things. We're going to do things, but the way that she did them wasn't based upon technology. It was based upon making sure that they're done right. Finding the necessary tools and the instructional strategies. At that time, we started working on common formative assessments. And so we made those for our math classes. It was great. Our school started rocking all these different standardized tasks because we were focused on what we needed to do. And all the other schools in our district were like, what are you guys doing? Well, this is what we're doing. Well, we heard about that, but how are you doing it differently? We're sticking to it. So that was truly, truly effective. The other piece though, and she was constantly walking around. The other piece though, that same district, different school, different time, but he was also effective. The principal was great because he walked around and he's like, hey, try it. Let's see what happens. Hey, well, there's a solution. So go ahead and find it and use it. And it was during that time that I took on I guess you can say the adjunct IT role, and took 3 of the carts. 2 were laptops and PC laptops, and the other cart were full of MacBooks, iBooks, those little square ones. Those are like awesome, but they weren't really working. So I said to my students, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Let's fix them, and then let's use them in our class. Let me tell you, it changed our culture and it changed our climate and how we did things, because they knew I was going to take risks and I wasn't going to be mean or upset about it. And it evolved in such a way that when it was time to do like independent work, I had kids transform the room from these, well, rows and columns into these different lines. And we just transformed it so that way they were able to be anywhere. I guess you could say, now that I think about it, it was flexible seating arrangement. They could sit anywhere and do anything that they wanted to do. So that goes right back up to the student empowerment and ownership. We're learners together, and that helped out a lot. But it was especially useful for me because I wasn't getting these ideas from inside my district. We had some professional development, and it was okay, but it was the support from Twitter. It was the support from my PLN that I was creating. So again, it goes back to making sure that you have a leader that's like, make your mark, take risks. I'm here to support you. If you do something different and you have a reason for it, I'm with you. I'm with you because this is different.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said. And I think, we talk about having a culture of yes a lot. And one important thing that I think that you said in there is that you talk about a leader that has your back mentality. But another important part was they have your support when you have the right reasons and you have the kids, best interests at heart and all of those things. Sometimes I think people misinterpret culture as yes, as you just do whatever you want, and I have to be okay with that. But it still does have to follow, certain guidelines of doing what's best for kids and things. So we have that discussion specifically from a technology department standpoint. People want to be able to do what they want to do, and sometimes a culture of yes is more like a culture of let's see how we can get that to work for you, because sometimes what you want to do isn't legal. So, but yeah, I do love that with support with, yeah. Go ahead. Did you want to say something? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Stacy, you hit it on the head. Exactly. The Noster model for change management is absolutely mind-blowing. And the reason why I say that is because there are so many times just in case you guys haven't seen it. It's awesome. You should just go ahead and Google that, because that model for change is something that I took to the curriculum instruction department. And I said, okay, where are we? Do we have a resistance? So what's missing? Oh, our incentives are missing. Hey, we're all anxious. What's going on? We're missing the skills. It was absolutely mind-blowing. And they're like, what in the world is going on here? But it was something that I had seen. And I'm like, okay, this is how we can make change and make it much more effective. So thank you, Stacy, for bringing that up.
Oh, yeah, I have seen this. I just saw it, actually. Somebody just introduced me to it. Thank you, Stacy, for bringing that up. I'm definitely going to look into it a little further. Okay. Does anybody have anything else on question 3? Otherwise, we'll move into our last question. All right, so in Divergent EDU, I speak about the characteristics of a divergent teacher, in which I developed in collaboration with Elizabeth Bostwick. And here are the characteristics to be identified. Deeply reflective, a voracious learner, tenacious, a mentor, and courageous. And so my question is, how do these characteristics relate to administrators as well? So we often look at teachers, we look at teacher leaders, and by that I don't mean the role. I just learned that that's an actual role in some districts. We don't have those here. We don't have teacher leaders here. So when I say teacher leader, I just mean teachers who are taking a leadership like stance, not an actual role. So teacher leaders, and then so we talk about those kind of characteristics with them. But so my question for you guys is, how do those characteristics relate to administrators too?
So in New Jersey, there actually is a certification program now that the state is working on for teacher leaders. So you can actually be a certified teacher leader in the state and go back to your school district with that. As far as an administrator goes, I think being a really good mentor for your entire staff, along with being is probably the most important aspect of it, because you have to be courageous to make decisions that are going to affect a lot of people in your building. And I think to really understand what your staff needs or what your students need, is you have to be involved. You have to mentor them. You have to get to know your staff and really get to know your students as well. So for me, it's after the decision is made, we obviously have to be reflective on what we did, what went right, what went wrong. I think a lot of school districts in New Jersey can kind of attest to that from last week with the snowstorm, with people getting caught in traffic for anywhere between 5 or 15 hours, and having students have to sleep in schools. But I think, again, a good leader stands in front of their staff and says, look, this is the decision I made. This is why I made it. Everybody backs that leader because they understand that the best interest of the students and the staff were at heart. And, I think being courageous is also part of that, where you have to be the person who's going to step in front of the board or the parents and say, look, I did the best I could with what I had. And, this is why I did it. I take full ownership of it, but I'm really about my students and my staff, regardless of the outcome. And, for me, it's working with my teachers every day. So I have to be really reflective after the end of the day and say, did we accomplish what we wanted? Did my teachers have everything that they needed to in order to be successful with their students? And I think that's a big issue for me in the tech department is, going in every day and say, how do we make this better for the teachers? How do we make this better for the students on an everyday basis?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I look at that list and I say, I want my kids. I want students in my class to graduate deeply reflective, voracious learners, tenacious, a mentor for the younger students in the grades, and courageous. And I think if we would like our students to have those attributes, which I would, then we would like to see our teachers have those attributes and model them. Then we certainly need our administrators to model those and possess those as well.
And I'm going to add on one thing to what you just said. I was trying to be quiet, but you reminded me, like when you said that, there's a graphic that George had, I don't know if it was in an innovator's mindset, but it was like 21st century skills or essential skills of every educator. And I had done a presentation back in the spring, and I was looking at it and I'm like, it's not confined to just the educator. Like, these are things that our students need to have as well. And so when I look at the list and I think about those terms like a mentor and being courageous and tenacious, I mean, those are the things that we need to have as educators. And they're probably, like Jen said, the things we need for our students as well. And so it makes sense that the administrators, we would want them to have those same characteristics, because if not, and if they're not, supporting us and they're not willing to try new things, it's going to be keeping things the same as they are always. And there's not going to be any growth that way. It's going to be stagnant, and nobody's going to feel like they can take any risks or try anything different. And so I think it's important, like if that's how we are, then everybody kind of needs to have that same thing. Like, I don't think today, you look at education and there are roles, but I think at the same time, there's not roles. Like, we're all learners. And I think we all need to be practicing and obtaining these different skills in a different pace, maybe, or in a different way based on what our actual role defined position is in education. But I think they're all things that we need to master. Like, we need students to become mentors. We need them to think about learning long-term, not just because they're getting a grade or getting points. One of my students is writing something now for me, and it's like amazing, where she's just saying, like, I'm not a number, and I've learned and I've practiced and I got bad grades, but I don't even care about the grade. Like, I just want to know that I learned something. Like, that means more to me, and I want to learn, like, what's the next thing? And so I think it's important, like Jen said, for us to model that and to be in a system where everybody's kind of like, I don't know, embodying that same thing, if that's the word that applies. I don't know. And I'm out.
So one thing I have to add here is that you asked, how does this relate to administrators? To me, if they're the leaders, they're the ones that need to be that. All of them. They should be all of those pieces, period. And the reason why is because they are in the forefront. They should be the voracious learner, trying to figure out what's going on, seeing how things are. The tenacity should be there. They should see that. A mentor, someone you can come and talk to, and courageous. Hey, let's make this. Let's see what's going to happen over here, because, within reason, within the laws and policies and things like that. But they have to be out there on the forefront, because when you have an administrator that is going to take the opportunity and the time to push and pull and say, let's do this together. I have no idea what's going to happen, but let's do it. You will start to develop a staff that's going to have the same type of mindset, or they're going to be so uncomfortable, says, you know what, you're just too crazy for me. I'm going to go ahead and I'm out. So, and that is so very important. But more than likely, if those that are saying, you know what, I'm out, are going to be the ones that are hanging on so tightly to what they know, or because they're so close to retirement that they don't want to change, they're going to be the ones that leave and go somewhere else. The ones that are going to say, you know what, this is awesome, I can grow, let me try this, they're going to be the ones that are going to become much more divergent and innovative in whatever they do. And I can speak from experience, because I've had those leaders. They were all of those voracious and tenacious, but as far as mentors and courageous, because they took the time and said, well, you know what, I'm not quite sure if that's going to work, but go ahead, let's see what happens. It checks all these boxes, so you're free to do it. So just providing the leeway and just having the understanding that I was different and that other teachers were different and we're going to try things is huge, definitely huge. So, but then also coming back and saying, what you did was great. How can we incorporate this in other ways? So bringing it back to what's the bigger picture, so we can involve other people, as well as what can I change in myself? So again, also being deeply reflective about what they're seeing and about the entire culture and climate that's going on in their school.
Yeah, so 1,000% of everything of what you guys said. We need to see it from students to administration. Teachers are going to be more likely to be divergent if they see their administrators doing it. And oftentimes I hear people say, they look at the divergent teacher characteristics and they're like, well, that's just being a teacher. But they're usually the divergent teachers who are saying that. And so if you look at some of the people around you, where do they fall in those characteristics? And I don't know if any of us have all of them. We're all, there's always a piece that people are working towards. Like our friend, one of our friends, Tisha Richmond on Twitter said, I think I need to work on my tenacity. And I said to her, like, I know how far you've come in the last few years. There's no way you're not tenacious, And so, but we all have those areas that we could work on. I have never, though, heard anybody say, I have a divergent administrator. Now, whether that's because we don't look for divergence in administration or what that is, I'm not really sure, but I've never heard that. And so my goal is really to start working on, like, what does divergent leadership look like as well, and to start thinking about that too. So awesome. I think that that's it. Sarah, I think I'm handing it back over to you.
All right, sweet. Well, thank you so much, Mandy, and thank you so much to all of our amazing panelists. Also, shouts out to everyone who is participating with us on YouTube Live or on Twitter. The conversation tonight was fire, so loved hearing everyone's perspective and thoughts on this. Wanted to give a huge shout out to Mandy once again for launching Divergent EDU last week. So awesomeness. That is now available on Amazon. So congrats, Mandy, for that. And really looking forward to great things to come. I know that tomorrow, if I read correctly on Twitter, then Mandy will be guest moderating. Is it Formative Chat, Rochelle? Okay, Formative Chat. So check that out. Going on tomorrow at 7:30 Eastern. All right, 7:30 Eastern. So for everyone watching live, definitely check that out. Check out Mandy's book on Amazon. Also wanted to remind y'all that next week, next week, I believe we are off, but we will be back in 2 weeks from then. So we are off on December 2nd. And we are also off on the 9th because we will be at Ties. Mandy will be there as well. Yes. Anybody else on panel going to be at Ties? All right. Jen?
Yep.
Yes. All right. So we're going to be doing a live edu match there. So we may be on Twitter. So just look out for that. Let me see. But we will be back on the 16th when we will be doing Tweet and Talk quotations on education featuring none other than the awesome Rochelle. Yes. Woo, we need sound effects. So definitely come back on December 16th and possibly on the 9th. And we'll be off on the 2nd for Visti. So looking forward to seeing all of our Visti friends on the 2nd and 3rd of December. So if you are watching live, I wanted to give a shout out to RJ League Chat. I'll be moderating that tonight at 8 p.m. So definitely check that out. Also keep your eyes peeled for the EduMatch Black Friday / Small Business Saturday / Cyber Monday sale going on now. So tomorrow's the last day to get $3 off 4 great titles. So I will drop the link for that on Twitter, or I'm sorry, the graphic for that on Twitter. So everybody have a fantastic week, and thank you so much for joining us.